background, your orientation, or your social status. Our struggles in this world are similar, and the lessons to overcome those struggles and to move forward, changing ourselves and changing the world around us, will apply equally to all. So here are the 10 lessons I learned from basic SEAL training that hopefully will be of value to you as you move forward in life. Every morning in SEAL training, my instructors, who at the time were all Vietnam veterans, would show up in my barracks room, and the first thing they'd do was inspect my bed. If you did it right, the corners would be square, the covers would be pulled tight, the pillow centered just under the headboard, and the extra blanket folded neatly at the foot of the rack. It was a simple task, mundane at best, but every morning we were required to make our bed to perfection. It seemed a little ridiculous at the time, particularly in light of the fact that we were aspiring to be real warriors, tough, battle-hardened SEALs. But the wisdom of this simple act has been proven to me many times over. If you make your bed every morning, you will have accomplished the first task of the day. It will give you a small sense of pride, and it will encourage you to do another task, and another, and another. And by the end of the day, that one task completed will have turned into many tasks completed. Making your bed will also reinforce the fact that the little things in life matter. If you can't do the little things right, you'll never be able to do the big things right. And if by chance you have a miserable day, you will come home to a bed that is made, that you made. And a made bed gives you encouragement that tomorrow will be better. So if you want to change the world, start off by making your bed. During SEAL training, the students are all broken down into boat crews. Each crew is 7 students, 3 on each side of a small rubber boat, and 1 coxswain to help guide the dinghy. Every day, your boat crew forms up on the beach and is instructed to get through the surf zone and paddle several miles down the coast. In the winter, the surf off San Diego can get to be 8 to 10 feet high, and it is exceedingly difficult to paddle through the plunging surf unless everyone digs in. Every paddle must be synchronized to the stroke count of the coxswain. Everyone must exert equal effort, or the boat will turn against the wave and be unceremoniously dumped back on the beach. For the boat to make it to its destination, everyone must paddle. You can't change the world alone. You will need some help. And to truly get from your starting point to your destination takes friends, colleagues, the goodwill of strangers, and a strong coxswain to guide you. If you want to change the world, find someone to help you paddle. Over a few weeks of difficult training, my SEAL class, which started with 150 men, was down to just 42. There were now 6 boat crews of 7 men each. I was in the boat with the tall guys, but the best boat crew we had was made up of the little guys, the Munchkin crew, we called them. No one was over 5'5". The Munchkin boat crew had 1 American Indian, 1 African American, 1 Polish American, 1 Greek American, 1 Italian American, and 2 tough kids from the Midwest. They out-paddled, outran, and outswam all the other boat crews. The big men in the other boat crews would always make good-natured fun of the tiny little flippers the Munchkins put on their tiny little feet prior to every swim. But somehow these little guys from every corner of the nation and the world always had the last laugh, swimming faster than everyone and reaching the shore long before the rest of us. SEAL training was a great equalizer. Nothing mattered but your will to succeed, not your color, not your ethnic background, not your education, not your social status. If you want to change the world, measure a person by the size of their heart, not by the size of their flippers.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Chaos Project podcast. I'm sorry. Oh, God. Yeah. Sorry.
Bless you. Bless you, Dale.
Yeah. I think I'm going to be hacking up a lung right now. Okay. We're here today with Sean Cloutier, who's a Canadian author and talks about a lot of stuff. And today we're going to get into some of the secularization of the schools and so forth, and the effects that it has had on Canada and so forth. You want to introduce yourselves to the audience?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dale. I appreciate you having me on this evening. Yeah, so everybody, my name Sean Cluche. If you'd like, you could visit my website, Sean fcluche.com, SeanFcluche.com. And I've written a number of books, more to come. I'm leading off with seven. I've written a number of books just on the education system in Canada. A few memoirs, yeah, a book about Christianity, the irreplaceable Christian, um, and a couple novels which I think are all du jour, which kind of speak to some of the things we're going through today. So that's a little bit what I've done. My background as well. I spent 7 years in the education system, and I think I bring a little bit of a different perspective to things as to kind of what's currently ongoing. I'm the guy that I'm insisting right now that there's no Marxism in the school. I often say the better word to call it is like white trash or crackpotism, even though as polite Canadians we're not supposed to use those words, but that's more along the lines of what we're supposed to say.
Yeah, it's more a problem of godlessness than anything um, in the schools, because at the end of the day, you can attribute it to like fatherlessness and godlessness to everything, because that's where things go sideways. Because we have a breakdown of law and order in this country and everything else like that. But yeah, let's get into it. Let's.
Yeah, that's what's I agree with that. And we're gonna get to that godlessness real quick. So I went to school in the mid 90s at Laurentian University. Oh, did I lose you, Dale?
I'm here. I just put you.
Okay, okay. Okay, you put me on full screen. Okay. Yeah, so I went to school in the mid 90s, and you know what, a better way actually to start this is how I like to, if I can, if I like to how to start these discussions. I always say to people that currently right now it seems for a lot of people, and I notice the trend, that somewhere between 2016, 2018, all of a sudden everybody started to hear what they've come to call as wokeism, right? You know, the land acknowledgments, the transgenderism, this kind of hyper feminism, this kind of um, having kind of like a little bit of this chaos, if you will, that we're seeing, where we're seeing the aggressive push for men and women's washrooms, if you will. Like these examples are coming up more and more, and a lot of it started around 2016, 2018, where professors were teach people in high schools where they were being mandated to use certain pronouns, this certain amount of language, and it's getting worse, if I can say so. Like, it's not going away. And I always say is that people look at it, so somehow it came as a shock to a lot of people. Like all of a sudden it just appeared out of nowhere. Like, if you were paying attention to it, you would see bits and pieces of this quote unquote wokeism here and there. But it really didn't start taking off till around 2016 and 2018. And a lot of people, I've seen guests on Joe Rogan where they're like, it seemed to come out of nowhere and appear all at once. And I insist, I say, look, there are people such as myself who were back in the universities in the mid 90s, and what you're seeing right now is nothing new. A lot of what you're seeing right now, I went through it at Laurentian University. I had a professor named Gary Kinsman, and all the business of transgenderism, all the business of woke, all the business of colonialism, how the white man, quote unquote, like we wouldn't be anything if unless we colonized India, took all the resources, and brought them to Canada. The genocide against like everything that you're seeing now, the transgenderism on how men, it's a spectrum. It's not male, female. There's like a spectrum between for both men and women where they sit on this spectrum between being male and female, transgender, bigender. Like all of this was starting in the 90s. And if I can, is to explain how it jumped from and it actually started even before the 90s. I would say this started in the late 70s and into the 80s. I encountered it in the 90s, and it just snowballed. And I'd like, if I can, is to explain what I mean when I say there's no Marxism in the school. It's crackpotism. it's not as much indoctrination at that time as it is a selection process. And the way it works inside the university, so I went and I did a degree, I wanted to do it in sociology and history. But the way it works is if you want to go on to get your 4-year degree, you need to have a 70 average, you need a 4-year thesis advisor. That's just to get your BA. And if you want to go on to graduate school, that's you also need 3 letters of recommendation. So what ends up happening inside the university system is they'll bring in a crackpot, like a professor like Gary Kinsman. I had other ones like Peter Shushnik, Carol Shushnik. I had a husband and wife team in my department. That's how out of control all this was. But it's like this in many of the departments. So when you walk in, what they'll do is they'll come and they'll they'll look at someone like you, Dale, and they'll go, "Oh, Dale is Christian. Dale is, he looks like he works out. He looks like he's kind of not really what we're looking for." So what we do, Dale, is we give you a 6 out of 10 on your paper, and I go, "Dale, if you don't like it, go fight it out with the administration." And then in another class with Peter Shushnik, I don't like you, Dale. You're not what I want. I'm going to give you a 6 out of 10. You have a problem with it? Go fight it out with the administration. Then you'll have a Gary Kinsman, and he'll give his lecture on transgenders. You go to give your presentation in class. I'm not going to let you do your presentation, Dale. 0 out of 10. You're not what we're looking for. Go fight it out with the administration. So what ends up happening is that Dale, I don't like you. And if I have another student who I do like, here's your A plus, here's your A plus, here's your A plus, here's your letter of recommendation. Now I'll do a 4-year thesis with you. So what ends up happening, I tell people this is what I'm describing right now is the biggest central problem of academia on how it works. And what ends up happening, if I could finish, is that what ends up happening is that they bring the whack jobs in and they get promoted on into graduate school. They go on to work in all these different government agencies. They go on to become the professors. And all the conservative students, or if they don't like you, just straight up just don't like you, that's it. We will administrate you out of the university. And this has been going on since 1980, 1990, all throughout the 2000s. So what ends up happening is for the better part of 30 years, if you're a Christian student, or if you're like me, at the time I'm not a tall guy. I'm only about 5'9", but at the time I weighed about 225 pounds of muscle. My appearance alone was I didn't even think about it at the time. And so what they'll do is they'll push you out. So all of a sudden in 2018, what ends up happening is that for 30 years, all the conservative students have been pushed out of academia. You push these screw jobs in, they've more or less taken over the education system. They're all throughout the government. And then all of a sudden it's like, surprise, okay, after 30 years, it all happens. They all started being very vocal and very aggressive. And I try to explain, that's the meat of the matter, and you want to jump in there, Dale?
Yeah. It actually starts earlier. There's a guy called Kazimierz Dabrowski. He's a Polish fellow. He's probably the most influential psychologist that you've never heard of. Most people have no idea who this is, but he heavily influenced Maslow. And he taught here in Canada at the University of Alberta, and they revere this man. He did a theory called the positive personality disintegration. This guy was brilliant. He classified gifted people better than I've seen anybody else do it when when he talked about the overexcitabilities. Because IQ testing is actually crap. It's honestly garbage, right?
Yeah,
Because they can't really qualify it, and it's geared in a way for scholastic tasks, and this was done for a reason, not actually how you can apply it, but how you can actually just perform on the testing, which is very inaccurate to begin with. But we can come back to that. But what he does, he has things in part of his positive personality disintegration. He says that the average person is a level 1, which is groupthink. 2 is you kind of question things. 3 is like Neo at the Matrix, take the red pill or the blue pill. But once you go past that, you can't come back. You get to level 4. Level 5 is like the visionaries, like Martin Luther King, the guys who were getting burned at the stake in Europe, and that kind of stuff. The guys that have their own internal set of values and they question everything. So when you go through school, and this is done here extensively in Canada and other places, but Canada is probably the world leader in doing this, they peg you when you go through school. This is why they want you in public school. They will flag you, and then they will determine what happens to you and filter where you go based on these things, because the people that question and do things, and Christians are high on the list of that because you're taught that way because of the way that you're raised, they will push you off and try to make your life hell. And then as you go to university and so forth, because I had the luxury of, or maybe the misfortune, which way you look at it, of going to university in the 90s, and then I went back in my 40s, right? And I remember talking to my program head going, I mean, are you serious that you're bringing this kind of stuff in? Because I'm like, when I was school in the 90s, you get laughed at school for this, and this is extremely like prejudicial. And I'm like, this is offensive. You shouldn't have this in the curriculum. I would tell them, I'm the paying customer here, and I need a return on my investment. So very different when you're going when you're 40s than when you're going when you're younger in your 20s or 18, 19, 20, that kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
situation. But yes, I agree with what you're saying is that they do get insane professors in there and shut other people out.
Yeah, I tried. I like I won't mention her name because I like her, but I was having this debate and I'm trying to explain to people, and one of the biggest problems that especially the online community, because I'm a lot more brute about the whole thing. Like I'm a lot more. I don't give the academic world a lot of credit, and I try to explain to people that there's nothing intellectual about what's going on. There's no, like they like to sit down and they call them Marxists, right? And I said, when I'm sitting there and I'm listening to these professors talk about transgenderism and transgender rights and talk about like land acknowledgements. First of all, most of these professors, they're all making 150 grand a year. They get retired off in their pensions at, 80% of their, like it's just ridiculous when they're talking about inequality. I mean, that's straight up, but there's no, I've read Karl, like I've studied a lot of Karl Marx's work on my own. Like I've read the Communist Manifesto, the German ideology. As crazy as it sounds, I even read parts of Das Kapital. Going through all those equations. And then I realized it's a waste of time. I read parts of the Grundrisse. I've read works of Thorstein Veblen and Emil Durkheim on, I've read his biography, um, uh, or biographies on Karl. Like it's the problem that I have is when people are describing what's going on with these professors. You will have a feminist professor where I had in the school where you had like Carol Shushnik, and she would just stand in front of the classroom and say, "Men hate women and children. Men hate women. Men hate children. We have to fight against the men. We have to fight against fight for equality, structural inequality. It's not fair that women, have to give birth and men don't, and more men become PhD. Like, it's not Marxism. I try to say to people, unless you're sitting across from these people, it's like dealing with, like when they refer to them as Karens, right? As a Karen, like there's nothing intellectual, there's nothing intelligent. It's just white trash. And sorry, go ahead.
So I'll explain to you what, because I made a comment, and I was the one who commented about the theosophy with feminism. That's actually a religion. It's essentially it's devil worship. They elevate the serpent, which is the devil, and say that he was the liberator of woman and tied to the fertility goddess. So you're getting and this is interwoven. The people who started feminism, they most of them were like this, or they were atheists. So atheists, they just were like, whatever, do whatever you want, right? And that was Susan B. Anthony, which was the atheist. But they had all of this ideas. And then when I read Gerda Lerner, the creation of the patriarchy, she ties, like, she makes marriage and men look like slave masters and create this oppressive thing. And it's literally like cult type thinking. And they tied some things that sound nice, but it was never designed to do that. They say straight out in the beginning that the biggest obstacle for them is Christianity, for their power is Christianity and the Bible. And then they looked at the white man, because of their social status, as the biggest obstacle to the power for the white women that wanted their power. This is what it was all about. And that's why they're like this. But go
Yeah,
ahead.
like yeah, like that's where I try to say, like I try to explain to people, because I wrote a book. If I wrote a book, Odyssey Awoke and Odyssey of Despair, but the Odyssey Awoke, and I think if people were to read through it, the first question would be, where's the Marxism? Where are the social justice warriors? Where are Jordan Peterson is, and I don't want to call Jordan Peterson a fraud, but most of the language that he uses when he speaks, like he plays it very safe because he can use that language, the Marxists, the socialists, the postmodernists, but deep down inside, and I think this is half the reason why he's sick all the time, he knows at that Oisey school at the University of Toronto, there's no Marxism there. Like a lunatic center. Like these crackpots that come out of there, and they're running the show.
Yes, but they do bring elements of socialism into it, and they had to because of feminism, because they had to bring women into a male dominated space. In order to get them to do this, they had to level the playing field and they had to lower the standard. This is why they were attacking men like crazy, right? Like when you look at the family
Yes.
court system, they just put men through the meat grinder. And now when women are going through it, they get destroyed because it was designed to destroy men. So when they started to have this indoctrination and have single mothers, and then they're indoctrinating their sons, and they don't have the male role model, and they're looking at this, and this is what they're doing, and then the school, what they're doing in the school is shifting it so that it's easier for women to learn more on the verbal task, less visual spatial, where men excel, or the strategic parts of our mind that we would normally use to go out and get ahead. They're inhibiting that so that women will continue to go further on, and women are easier to get to comply as opposed to a man. Because if a man has to feed his family and stuff like that, and you're not paying enough, he'll be like, "See you later. I'll go down to the next place if you're not going to treat me right." Women don't do the same things. They're less confrontational.
Yeah, but I would say as well as that the other, the general rule when I look at this is I try to, because I tried, as crazy as it sounds, I tried to fight against all this stuff back in 2006, 2007, 2008. And I came to the brutal conclusion that like no journalist will ever take your phone call. I called 30
No,
lawyers, and the lawyers, I'm like, do you have any, like I'll give you a story, just an idea. When I was in university, we had the professor. He would teach this story about this Etoro tribe in Papua New Guinea, and I hope you have a strong stomach for this, Dale. Where this, to become a man in this for this tribe in Papua New Guinea, the boys, a 10-year-old boy, has to give head to the man to suck in his masculinity. Right? This actually exists. It's all documented. It's a true story. And there's been, and I've even seen this stuff circulate on X, but it's true. But in the classrooms, we have this professor who will stand in class and he'll talk about this, and he'll say that if we look across cultures and society, we will see that the white male patriarchal society, namely the United States, is not the norm, and that there's all kinds of sexual possibilities, right? And he'll refer to this. One time, actually in class, he said straight up, the men in this classroom are going to have to learn that sex between men and boys can also be the norm, because if we look across cultures and societies, we will see that white heterosexual sexuality is not the norm, right? I can go down and I could go to any journalist, any politician, anybody in the country, lawyer, nobody will. And I remember when we were in the classroom, they were freaking out. Like the girls, everybody's freaking out. And what's mind boggling is, again, people say, oh, it's Marxism or it's socialism or whatever you want to call it. I'm like, no, man, it's vile. It's disgusting. And what you guys, and nobody does anything. You can call whatever, like even, I've had fights with journalists now on X Online, and I'm like, do you realize what they were teaching in school when I went? And you guys did nothing, and you still do nothing, right? Like they don't like, and it's mind-boggling in the sense that you'll have these professors that will sit in there for 20 years, and they determine who goes on to graduate school, who goes on to become like it's a massive problem. And a guy like Stephen Harper, even like they just don't like. I try to say it's not Marxism. We're living in like the decline of Rome type period, right?
we're
It's like a French Revolutionary type period or the decline of Rome. It's not there. There's nothing. These people, and you know what? I'll say this, Dale, if I can.
yes,
Like I say to people, okay, just go back 10 years since Jordan Peterson has been around, 2016, and go, have you ever seen one YouTube video with any Canadian professor talking about Karl Marx and seizing the modes, like the modes of production? No. Have you ever seen a TikTok video, an X video? Like, name me one university professor in Canada who is this Marxist. Nobody can do it because they don't exist. And I give the example of Leo Panich, who's dead now, and I said, that guy is not a Marxist. He may call himself a Marxist. He might write books about Karl Marx. He makes $350,000. Like his wife was making $250,000 a year. These are the caviar gauche. Like they're not Marxist.
Well, they just appropriate certain sections, like the state being bloated and controlling things, but they don't. Obviously, they're not obviously following that to a T. We can get that. That I can understand, no problem. What we're seeing here is the only way that I can sit down and describe this is satanic. I mean, because what you're seeing when you're openly talking about pedophilia and bringing those types of things in, as a Christian, when I read in the Bible, when societies were doing that, God wiped them out
Yes,
because
yes, that's where we're going.
when the people in the promised land, this is what they were doing. Because we were talking and discussing the other day about feminism. The fertility cult, Astarte, Ashtaroth, Baal, Apis, whatever, whether it's the male or female aspect, and Jezebel was a high priestess of Astarte, right? And so forth. They have two things that are pillars of that type of worship: the sexual immorality, which ends up doing filth to children, because in the Bible it says rape is like rising up and slaying your neighbor. And you can say that the same thing to a child. Destroying a child would either be raping them or killing them. So you either rape a child or do the sexual immorality that goes along with the worship or the killing of children. When you look at feminism, what are the two main tenets of feminism? My body, my choice, kill the child at will, and sexual liberation. And they tie it
Yes.
directly to the fertility goddess. Gerda Lerner makes that explicit tie, and you can see it throughout feminist authors all the way. So they're pushing a satanic agenda. There's no other way to say it.
You know what's interesting? Uh, there's some debate, and I've seen in the United States where they're saying that the woman shouldn't like lecture the men, which I kind of disagree on. It was Stuckey, I think her name was Elizabeth
Ali,
Stuckey.
uh,
She
uh, yeah. I think it's Ali Stuckey. I think maybe.
Ali Stuckey, yeah. And I like her. I like what she says, but I think, Dale, one of the things that I saw when I was in the university system, and uh, and if I could finish this idea, because I don't want to be like an anti-woman type person. But Ali, you're right. Ali Stuckey. Thanks. That is correct. Ali Stuckey. She like the problem that I saw in the university, and it's the first time in history that we've ever seen this, where it's the closest that women have ever come to having control over men. Because for the 2000 years or whatever, for the entire human history, men have more or less run the show in all societies, right? It's like the men are the boss. And one of the problems that when we're looking at in the university, what I realized is that it's the first time women they have power over men. And what's happening is you're getting guys that are coming in at 19, 20 years old, kids, and they're turning into young men. And if you're a woman, a feminist, and you believe that men and women are identical, or they should be identical, you cannot help but see before your very eyes the differences in aptitudes and abilities. Like there's like when I was going in, I realized that even myself with the professors, a lot of the female professors, they wanted to talk about it'd be a class on statistics. And I'd have one Carol Shushnik where she's talking about the problems with menopause, the problems with um, like women and sexuality and negative sexual experience with women and sexuality, which I don't have a problem with, but that's women's studies. Like it's not statistics. And what ends up happening is that a guy like myself, when I'm going through, I want to read the heavier books. I want to read the Max Webers, the Emil Durkheims, the Thorstein Veblen's, and I want to go in a different direction and think in abstract terms, which is what you're supposed to be doing. But what ends up happening is the feminists, it's like they'll just push you out of the school system. But and that's where a lot of women, even on the conservative right, there is a problem by having the university system so feminized because it turns into.
And the
But now, if I can
churches.
fit, yeah, if I could finish, like we say in the church, women shouldn't. Because don't get me wrong, to be honest with you, my best teachers ever was Mrs. Clausey, she taught us about the Bible, taught us about how to say the Lord's all different prayers, and so I don't want. But that being said, Dale, the best person, and she doesn't get enough credit for it, for writing a book about what's going on in the university system, was a young woman named Lindsay Shepherd. She was like 20 some odd years old. At one point in time, she was pregnant. She was being attacked by like 10 men. I counted them up on Twitter. There was one guy, this guy from Nipissing University in Northern Ontario, who was stalking her. I could see it on Twitter, and I'm like, how is it that you get? And they're all university professors. It's mind-boggling. So you have these university professors who are stalking this 21-year-old girl who's pregnant online about what she's saying against the universities. So my point being is that there's women like Ali Stuckey, there's women like Abigail Schreier who wrote her book about the transgender craze. There's Lindsay Shepherd, but it's this vile academic feminism that has seized control of the university system, and it's feminized the university system. It's taken the education system, like the students that go on to teachers college or they've gone into running like your high school system. It's it like it's not doing it any good. You know what I mean? And I can't see it getting much better.
Yeah, yes, and I think people have a big misunderstanding because when you look at the biblical patriarchy, what God said out in the Bible and what they teach in feminism, they're two different things. They take the worst men and say that this is God's design. Now, if you go back to creation, you look at what God did. He sets out the roles for men and women by his actions because men speak by their actions. Women do not. Women are verbal. I grew up with five women. They do not think, and I do not understand how they process things. I see their actions, but I don't understand the motivation behind it because it's foreign to my thinking. God told Adam the life and death situation. Man is the protector. Then he created the circumstances and he went into the garden to dress and keep it before his wife came. So man is responsible for the critical infrastructure. We're designed that way. And then he brought Eve. But they're both supposed to work together. The whole idea of submission is for the woman to submit to the man's love and protection to do the things for her that she can't do for herself, which is protect
Yeah,
herself
yeah.
against bad men, right? Like that's what it's for. It's not for you to domineer the woman or beat her down or anything like that because that God doesn't approve of that. But when it comes to dealing with the protection, let the man handle that and be loved by your husband. What's wrong with that, right? Like I mean, most women would want that. So when it comes to doing that, let the man lead because how are you going to defend yourself against a bad man? It's easier for him to do it. Let him do it.
Even something that's more spectacular is that when you go to university, I spent 4 years, 5 years, well, I spent 7 years in the university system. You cannot understand Karl Marx. You cannot understand Friedrich Nietzsche. You cannot understand Emile. Like you cannot. Most of these Canadian, sorry, excuse me, most of these authors that these people claim to understand, you cannot understand Karl Marx unless you have some notion of the Bible and the way the Christians used to think in Europe. A lot of these people, when I'm sitting down, if you're born and you never went to church, you never opened a Bible, and you're trying to read Karl Marx, how like just real basic of what I mean. Karl Marx is the materialist concept of history. Man is what he is in the materialist sense, right? So you work as a pipe fitter, right? That's what you are. You're a pipe fitter. You have to fight. You have to create your union, your socialist system, then your communist system, take over control of the means of production, and then get your full value of your labor, right? A few sentences. But the point being is that materialist conception of history, where you and I as Christians, we have a spiritual conception of history. I look at you, Dale, you are not what you are in a physical sense. You're not your job. You're not your skin color. You are created in the image of God. And there's a totality to you. There's an immortality. Like there's something incomprehensible about you I could never fully understand, just because of the totality of who you are. You are what you are in a spiritual sense, and as a Christian, it's you try to live up to that spiritual goal, which is turn the other cheek, do unto others that have been done unto yourself. The Ten Commandments, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt respect the Sabbath, right? The whole it's living up to life in the spiritual sense. Whereas Karl Marx, what he does is when he comes along, he goes, never mind all that spiritual sense stuff. You are what you are in the materialist sense, right? So he sees people as a reflection of the material world. So you have to fight for the material conditions. You have to fight to get all your full all your like it's a foul. I'm bastardizing Karl Marx to a certain extent, but if you don't have that duality, if you go into a university and you don't have that Christian sense compared to the materialist sense, like what exactly are you teaching when you're talking about Karl Marx? Because Karl Marx's audience was a Christian audience. See, the one thing is, Dale, is I like some of what Karl Marx does, but I'm not a Marxist. I'm Christian, but you can use some of his tools, some of his ideas to better understand Christianity, right? There's this, but if you have no background, like I just find it mind-boggling how, and you can see it. I mean, I can explain for you if you want a little bit of the history of how, like in Canada, especially in the United States and in Canada, how we went from Christian universities to these secular universities. I mean, I don't know if you're up for that.
Yes, because this was actually all part of agenda. And like I said, if you're not a Christian, you're fully not going to understand what is going on. Because at the end of the day, people can call all of these isms whatever they want, but at the end of the day, it is moving us away from the structure of society the way that God wanted it, where we were blessed and our civilization was pro- progressing very well, to moving to this more chaotic type, like I do what I want, do what thou wilt is a whole of the law, and that's where we're moving to at the end of the day. They're breaking us down, and that's not where we want to go. But yeah, go ahead.
See, another thing I should have done is I should have, like, I'm working on another paper and it's my own manifesto because some of my books are kind of long and complicated, but there's one other one I wanted to make it 18,000 words, very simple. But one of the problems that I see, especially in Canada, and the difference is the way the government approaches, is that even myself, when I went to school as a Christian in my little Christian school, again, it was like Dale is an immortal being. You're a child of God. You're created in the image of God. There's a totality to you. There's an incomprehensibility to you that I can never fully understand. Like I would have to live for eternity to fully understand Dale because you're fundamentally like an eternal being. Like where we've moved from that is we've moved down to this new language which the government, the secular government, uses to describe you, Dale. Now, who are you, Dale? You're a taxpayer. You're left or right. You're a ratepayer. You're a revenue stream for the like. It's so cold, so calculating, so impersonal, and it's across the board, right? Like especially Canada's even worse than even the United States because at least in the United States you do have some Christian politicians and some Christian influence. But I say that like you can clearly see the pathway where it goes from, and if I can, you know what, if I can explain a little bit what ended up happening and how a lot of this Canada became secular, especially in our universities. So if you go back before 1950, inside Canada's university systems, they were all religious institutions. Like University of Laval was the Jesuits, the University of Toronto was Anglican. In Laurentian University, where I went to school, it was Presbyterian, it was Catholic, I believe Anglican as well. Like there were three different religious groups.
Mm-hmm.
But what ended up happening is that around 19, so you had the baby boomer generation being born, and into the 60s, all of a sudden the governments began to realize, they said, you know what, we got this big cohort of students coming through, this new generation. We want to give Canadians access to like a higher education, a university education. But when they would go to some of these universities, like a Laurentian University, the government at that time, they didn't want to give the money directly to the Catholics or to the Anglicans or any of the Protestant denominations because it was a secular society. So what they did is they created a front school called Laurentian University. So now the government is giving money to Laurentian University, which is secular, non-denominational, right? And it was like this in a number of the universities, even in the United States to a certain extent, and I know throughout Canada where this same operation was taking place. Some of the schools, like York University, was initially built right from the ground up as a secular institution. But what ended up happening is the government gives this money to all these universities, right? And it's great. We're going to give it to the universities. And so the universities can now build libraries. They can now bring in departments of sociology, political science. They can now open up, all these different schools, engineering, you name it. We're gonna open up all these departments, and so we can educate the young people. Which, on the surface level, it was great. But what it did is all of a sudden, where the religious part of the school was very big, it suddenly made it smaller, smaller, smaller. And if you take a look as they're building even the architecture all throughout Canada, and I've seen this in the United States, where if you look at the buildings, it's all this gray concrete because it was the cheapest way to build these schools. So they build them all these gray concrete, monoliths all throughout, the West, right? Because it was the cheapest way to educate this generation of baby boomers. Generation of baby boomers come in, they get educated. That religious generation, the Tommy Douglases of the world, who our healthcare system in Canada, people forget he was a Baptist minister, right? Pierre Trudeau, Justin Trudeau's father, was educated by Jesuits. He had a very spiritual, intensive life. People forget this. He's not as secular as you might think he was. But just about Adam Beck, the Ontario Hydro, it always pops into my mind. Christian, Christian, Christian. And mainly, and I want to give credit where credit's due. I grew up Catholic, but it was mainly Protestants. It was mainly, it was a Protestant adventure, like both in Canada and the United States. And so what ended up happening is this baby boomer generation came through. They started getting educated. Everybody's happy. Then they started taking over the university system into the 70s and into the 80s. And into the 70s and 80s, you saw this huge unionization movement that went through, like I believe it was in the early 80s in Laurentian University where they became unionized. So now all of a sudden, the baby boomer generation moved in, they became unionized. So now if you're an academic administrator, you have a very large university, you have multiple departments, you have pensions, salaries, you have to contend with unions, lawyers. These things start all taking on a flavor from let's go to university, evangelize to learn the Bible, maybe become a nurse, maybe become like a teacher and teach in some northern school, to full-blown, we have to bring in students. We have to bring in as many students as we can because now we have salaries, pensions, benefits, and these growing, this mass. And I'm going to speak about Donald Trump in a minute because he's alluded to this, where you have these massive universities, right? So now I come in the mid-1990s, and all of a sudden, it's literally close to being a business. Not all of it. Like, do not get me wrong. They are teaching in the nursing department. They are teaching proper nursing. In the engineering, back when I was there, proper engineering. In a lot of these departments, what they were teaching is correct and decent stuff. But the problem is into the histories, the sociologies, the political science, the departments of literature, departments of transgender studies. And so what they started to do at the University of Toronto and at York University and all these different universities, keep expanding these programs to attract students. It's like a mathematical equation. If you bring in one professor of transgenderism, you might bring in 30, 40, 50, 100 students that are going to come in. So each is going to pay $8,000 in tuition, and you get about $10,000 from the government. It's a mathematical equation. You bring in the professor of transgenderism, you pay him 150 grand a year, but you're going to make $1 million, 1.5. It's like our healthcare system now, what it's turning into, $1.5 million in student revenue. And so by the mid-90s, I'm telling you, nobody at that point in time, nobody cared anymore. Where I went to school, I won't swear, but nobody cared anymore what the professors were teaching. All they cared about is bringing the students, attracting them in, and it's like bring them in for 4 years, 5 years, stay there for 20 years. They don't give a shit what you do, but you just bring them in. And so if we keep moving forward, now you're hearing Donald Trump, right? And you'll see this in Ontario. I'll give you a very clear example of what I mean. Now it's so much of a business that in Ontario, the universities and the colleges, they're saying, let as many immigrant students come in. It's good. It's good for the country. We'll educate them, whatever. Because, and I hate talking in terms of race, Dale, but they're running out of native-born, quote-unquote, white Canadians at Queen's University, Laurentian University. So now,
Y-
if I could just finish this note,
yeah,
they don't care if you're from Pakistan, Indian, Hindu, Chinese, if you're from Saudi Arabia in the case of Laurentian University. They got bills to pay. They got seats to fill. Just keep letting them in because how are we gonna keep the lights on? And here, what you're seeing, and I'll finish on these 2 points. What you're seeing now at McGill University in Concordia, because you have this large Muslim population of an Islamic population, the universities are now like, let's offer Islamic studies, let's offer Muslim and Muslim studies. Why? Because that's where the money is. Because that's where all the young Canadians, they're drying up. We need the money. You bring in like these students, but I'll finish off on this, and I'm abbreviating everything as much as I can. Donald Trump just recently said the same thing. He goes, "We have to let in foreign students for the because he realizes they're saying to him, Mr. Trump, there's not enough native-born black students in the United States. We have to bring in students from wherever, Pakistan, India, Afghanistan, like Japan, wherever we can get students. We got to bring them into the university system because there's not enough native-born Americans to fill all the seats that baby boomer generation cohort was massive. The Generation X a little bit smaller, smaller, smaller. Generation Alpha now, it's non-existent. So the universities they don't give a shit. It's all money. Anyways,
yeah,
go ahead, Dale.
yes, and this was done by design, right? And bringing in the people where they're bringing a lot of them from India and that part of the world, that's also done by design as well. And I was looking at this from the inception, but though it's no mistake that they expanded the university program as they were going through the sexual revolution and making abortion very popularized, because then you got a
Yeah,
drop in the birth rate. Then once the women went into the workforce, the prices tripled and they couldn't go back. So now you're having a force where they're going to have to work longer. Women are going to have to go in and work. They're not going to be able to prioritize families. It's also you're made fun of to be like a stay-at-home mother and all that kind of stuff. So the population is shrinking and it's continuing to shrink because they're
yeah,
indoctrinating and teaching that you can do all these things. This isn't a big deal. Like children replacement population is going to come out of the void, and then now they're like, oh, wait a second, we're going to have a population collapse. Well, you knew that. You did it anyway. And so now what do they have to do to fill up other than close down all of these schools and have all these unions? Well, let's start doing this, the international student program and start bringing them in by the droves. And then when you get
yes.
certain people from India, India has a caste system. And if you're of a certain caste, you are taught that this is all you will be. And with those
Yeah.
foreign workers that you're seeing, that those people live like slaves, and that's all they will be. And you can't bring them here because this is generation upon generation of this is their belief. The people over there of the upper class have no regard for these people, and they bring them here and treat them like animals, and they live like animals, and then they bring them here to do this so that they can get their cheap slave labor. This is what it boils down to, because Canadians will tell you where to go, and I'm not doing that and working under those conditions because that's not right. So they bring those people in to get that cheap labor. And all of this stuff, when you're looking at it, when you look at this from a 40,000-foot view, you can see that this was done by design to bring us to where we are now. This is
See,
impossible to be otherwise.
Dale, it's funny if I can say this. Like I fall on a little bit like a different spectrum on or a different way of viewing it. A lot of people like I don't see that there's any group of like there's no I don't believe in the globalists, right? There's a globalist group trying to control all of society, or the Jews trying to control society, or the like. I don't. Where I just see that fundamentally, as a Christian guy, when I look at it, that somewhere in the 70s, and there's a generational aspect to it. And I want to be fair on this. It's not the generation of baby boomers in the private sector. It's the generation of baby boomers that ran the government when they took over, when they started taking over in the 70s and the 80s, that they just came in and they just destroyed everything on a moral plan and on a financial plan, and they're packing up their bags, they're leaving like a catastrophe, right? And because somebody should have said back in the 80s, like, because the decline in the birth rate started in the 70s, and someone should have said this is going to be a problem. Like, the people aren't having families anymore. Like, even myself growing up, like, I never married for there's different reasons why I never got married myself. But I thought about it one day. I was working in the office and I was looking around, and the number of women and men in my office that were single without kids, like, it's just mind-boggling. And I know my parents, they said in the 70s everybody was married with kids. Like, it's just the way it was. And already, like, it's not. But they like, I just see it as a little bit like Stephen Harper one time said as well, and I'm not a fan of Stephen Harper at all, but he was on this show in the United States, and he said it's not Marxism in the schools, it's nihilism. He goes, that's what it is, and I'm like thinking, no, it's just garbage, right? And I'm like thinking, you were prime minister for 10 years, you knew this for 10 years, and you did nothing, right? Our education system, like you did, and you still do nothing. Like you insulate yourself. Like, he's part of the problem. Like, a lot of these politicians are like, everyone kind of, like, a lot of people can see the problems coming, and it's just this I like, en français, un m'en foutisme. Like, they just, nobody cares. Like, I can go to a journalist, any of these Canadian journalists, which I tried to do, and I could go, look what's happening in the school system. This is going to become a problem in 10, 15, 20 years where we're at now. And nobody cares. Nobody, like, it's just mind-boggling how little, like, these people, that's my attitude on it anyway.
When from a Christian perspective, at the end of the day, it's the devil. There's a war going on between God and the
Yeah, yeah,
devil,
yes, exactly, yeah.
and you can, regardless of the way you look at it, you can sit down and see that there is minds behind this, and this has to be the devil because you can have people that are completely unrelated doing things towards an objective, and that's beyond mankind. Like, at the end of the day, it's God and the devil working through people to accomplish the ends, and God's going to win. So this is where I look at it by this way because some of this stuff has been taking place gradually over longer than any human being has been alive. And the only person that can orchestrate this is why the Bible makes more sense. Because how do you get the entire world to go down like this? I don't care how many human beings you have that are in cahoots. You need to have something else that's going to coordinate this because this is too much done to a T with too many random people doing things because people just don't get along, right? Do you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah, like, it, it's, there is like, there is a huge problem in this secular society, this secular godless society, and like, I don't know where I see it more in the United States, but I mean, it's as clear as, like, they call it leftism or wokeism, but it's just, uh, the reason why I say this, and if I can make this point, the reason why I try to say to people, don't make it more intellectual than what it is. Call it call it crackpotism. Call it whatever word you want, lunacy, crackpotism. And the reason I say this is that before the French Revolution in 1789, a lot of the French, they had a very clear idea about the king, Louis the 16th, and very similar to what's going on now. You had super high taxation on the part of the government. You had people unable to, feed their families. You had a two-tier legal system, and those people never said about the king, oh, he's the representative, like, of God. Right? Like, they were already calling him a despot. William Doyle, it's one of the books I just read, where it was commonly agreed by the people at all levels. And what was mind-boggling is even the nobles, de Tocqueville points this out, even in the church, the nobles, the people that were literate and educated, they were discussing openly about new systems of governance because they realized that their
This wasn't going to
system with
work.
this king, this is not going to work. And they were openly saying that, we have a despot. And I'm like, I'm trying to say to people, like, it's not Marxism. Like, this, whatever system this is, the Canadian democracy, the American democracies, democracies in the West, they were all, Pierre Trudeau, Justin Trudeau's father, wrote on this. He said, that it was the Christianity that paved the way for the democracies because all the people shared the same values. De Lamennais wrote on this where they all shared the same values, the same outlook on life, the same conceptions. They were united, around God, right? So you take that out, these quote unquote democracies begin to fall apart because now you have to have the government coming in and regulate. Bill C8, Bill C10, Bill C21, gun control, freedom of speech control, Bill C100 with Doug Ford, all about you're going to try to protest like the truckers again? No way. We have every single law, we have the computer systems, we have everything in place. A trucker revolt will never happen again in Canada. You do this, you'll find yourself either A in jail, very like it's out of because you're coming into like a non-religious type state where the government now has to step in and regulate everything, right? And not only regulate the people because the government is so corrupt that it has to keep the people in line. Like, and that's where I say is that at least the people in France in 1789 had the good sense to call Louis XVI like a despot. And by people sitting around, and this is where I get annoyed with some of the people I like, it's like the government comes down. So here's the Canadian taxpayer, right? So the Canadian taxpayer is racist, sexist, misogynist. The Christians are lunatics. They're all, there's no goodness in any of these people. Where all the intelligence, all the Marxists, all the socialists, all the people that have studied in the universities, Michel Foucault, Jacques Derrida, like that's where Jordan Peterson still does this. That's the cognizant elite. That's where all the goodness and all the values are. Whereas in the average Canadian person, there's nothing. We just need to be regulated. So if you have to stop using their language. It's like you're using their language, Marxism, and it's going against yourself. Whereas the best thing to do is I just call it white trash, crackpotism.
What?
It's run by crack. And until you actually talk to these people, they're crackpots.
Well, yes, they don't have any logic to what they're doing, right? And this is, and you know, like I have a background in mechanical engineering technology, and I got a bachelor of technology from Memorial University, and I'm glad that I took that because there's less filth in engineering because thermodynamics and physics, like I mean, you can't pollute it. It has to work and
Yes.
do something tangible, which I'm glad for. But when you look at the people who do a lot of this theoretical stuff, like the humanities and so forth, some of these people they're not rooted in reality. They have a lot of these ideas that they talk about,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I'm like, well, how are you going to accomplish that in a practical sense? How are you going like think about how you're going to actually make that work with people?
Yes.
It's like you're not reasonable. You're not thinking because that just will never work, right? Because you got to deal with people. And this is where we're seeing this disconnect, where we're seeing literally the forces at work for the French Revolution. I've told this people for years. You're seeing
Yes.
this
Yes.
is the exact same thing, and they're trying to provoke the conflict because at the end of the day, the devil is behind this because he loves this kind of stuff because he's the devil,
Yes.
right? So we have to not do this because God wants to save people. Because what father wants to see their children suffer? God's a father. He doesn't want his children to suffer. He wants his
Yes.
children to
Yeah.
come to him, not do this whatever the devil is planning for them. So we have to start doing things in the right manner. And I sit down and I tell people all the time, it's got to be Christians to fix this situation. Because if you're not a Christian and you don't understand what is going, you're not going to get the full understanding. You're going to go down all these different rabbit holes that are not necessary to go down, and you're going to waste more time, and people are going to die because the enemy.
W- w-
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I was going to say the one thing I like about Christian people is that if you're a Christian and you read the Bible, and I don't mean you have to read it 10 hours a day, but if you just, you're a Christian, 15 minutes a day, you say your prayers on Sunday, it's like it gives you a foundation. Like there's something to your personality, a foundation where at least you have some kind of moral direction, you have some kind of spiritual direction. You have Jesus giving practical directions as well, how to pray, how to treat like very very like you have a personality on which if you push against, there's something there. where I see a lot of these people today, and highly, highly intelligent people, where they're not Christian, and like they end up almost like a ChatGPT or an LLM themselves, and that what they're doing is like they have no, and I don't mean this in a bad way, like they have no center core, they have no sense of morality, and
Yes.
they don't want, like, and what ends up happening, you're almost like a hard drive, like you're like an LLM where, okay, I'm gonna take out whatever training you had, and I'm just gonna put in a new disk. I'm gonna put in whatever the government's gonna teach you. Wear your mask, get vaccinated, you're diseased, hand in your rifle, like whatever, and there's nothing because you never went to church, you never read the Bible, you went through a secular school system, you just listened to your teachers. Your goal is 9 to 5, shop till you drop. Like there are all these coordinates around you where you're just going to go back and forth, and now the government's going to come in and say, okay, this is what you got to do, or this is how you have to behave. These are the verbs and the nouns and the pronouns. Yeah, like you might as well be like a computer. I'm just going to take out one
That's e-
set of disks and put in another.
that's
Where a
exact.
Christian, the Christian, I can't like, okay, I'm gonna try to stick this disc into you, and you get pushed back on it. Like, no, this doesn't this data you want to put inside me, it doesn't jive with what I believe, right? So,
That's
and
exactly it.
I gotta, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to sit down and say, because God says, "Come, let us reason together." So He wants you to think and understand why you're doing it, because you're going to be like, "Okay, this makes sense, so I'm going to do this." When the government comes to tell you to do this, you're going to be like, "No, that doesn't make sense." And from my
Mm,
experience, when I look at what God says, He says things for a reason, because He knows what He's talking about. Because I was a kid, I was like, "Yeah, no, I don't want to do that," and then it was like, "Oh yeah, that's just kidding." God knows what He's saying. He tells you not to do that, not because He's trying to kill your joys, because He doesn't want you to have problems, because they might look nice, some of the things He tells you not to do, but at the end they blow up in your face and cause you more harm. So you're like, it's like your parents, right?
yeah, and what's fascinating is this I point out as well. Everyone has to remember in Canada, it was the Christians who built the university system so that people could study Karl Marx and Michel, not the other. It wasn't Karl Marx or the Marxists that built our school system. It wasn't the Marxists who built or Michel Foucault. Like there's like these historical steps that you cannot deny. And I'm like it was the Christians who built the society in the United States and both in Canada and in Europe. There's no university that was not La Sorbonne, the big school in France that a lot of the Canadians like to talk about. This was built by Christians in the Middle Ages, right? Like it was all the whole, and everybody knows this now, right? It was all designed by the Christians. But one one thing I always found kind of revolting is that when I was in school, they had to do the critical race stuff, right? And I remember, I don't know if how much of bodybuilding you follow, right? But I always found the hypocrisy with critical race theory, and I try to explain to people, critical race theory is not like again, I had to go through this in the 90s, and I say it's not what you think it is. So I remember as a kid, right? I was big into. Were you into bodybuilding at all, Dale? Like, Ronnie Coleman, Flex
Yeah,
Wheeler. I don't know if these names.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, I know who these guys are.
Okay. So I always used to say to people when I could remember very clear. Okay, we're a bunch of white guys sitting in a change room at a gym called FitPro in Aurora. This in Toronto. And we're all sitting around. We're all in our underwear. We're reading the bodybuilding magazines. We're a bunch of white guys arguing about what black guy looks best in a speedo, and not in a gay way at all. Do you know what I mean? But my point being is that here we are. We don't care at all about like skin color. You know what I mean? Bodybuilding is only about physical appearance. And I used
Yes,
to say to myself, yeah, like, but back in the day, we'd have these arguments like Ronnie Coleman, he's the best, or Flex Wheeler, he should have won a Mr. Olympia, or Sean Ray was another one, right? All these, we're all
yeah,
arguing about like, not, no, but when you go into the university system, the professors themselves, it's the most vile kind of racism. So I'm like thinking at that time, like, I wasn't racist at all. You know what I mean? Like, I did not care when I'm 20 years old looking at these bodies. You know what I mean? Like, it's like sports. It's like Mike Tyson as well. Like, I used to look at Mike Tyson and go, man, I'd love to be able to look like him. You know what I mean? The six pack, the shoulders, and
yeah.
all that stuff. But we're we're not like, or you'd listen to your favorite comedians, Jamie Foxx, or you'd listen to like even today, Neil deGrasse Tyson when he's talking about physics. I listen to him all the time, and I don't understand that shit, by the way. But the problem that I have, yeah, I mean, when he gets going, I'm like, the blind, I
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah,
something's
yeah,
going
yeah.
over my head. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, yeah, okay, I gotta watch this 2 or 3 times to, you know what I mean? And I have to listen when he's talking about, time is, the faster you go and whatever. Anyway, but my point being is when you go inside the classroom, you would have the professors, like, they're the most foul, racist people that they're like, they only see skin color. Like it's mind-boggling. I'm like thinking, you only like, and the accusations, it's like when they're referring to it, it's all the problems of the world, all the problems in Africa, all the problems for black people. It's 100% the fault of the white people, right? Like as white
That's
people, we don't
nonsense.
understand, blah blah.
It's a
Like,
sin
and I'm just
problem,
like, yeah, it's a
right?
sin pro. Like, and I wrote in my book, The Irreplaceable Christian. Like, and this is what I try to do. In my book, there's one section I wrote. It's on Tanner. He's a 19th century African American painter, and he made a painting called The Thankful Poor. One of my favorite paintings. I just like the colors on it. It's like these subtle, you know, aquamarine type blue, the browns. Like if you ever have a chance, Tanner, and the painting is called The Thankful Poor.
Okay.
And where I wrote it in my book, I write about 2,500, 3,000 words on that section, and I bring in the Lord's Prayer, right? And I try to imagine myself that here's this father and son, the thankful poor. They're saying the Lord's Prayer, and how when Jesus said, he never said, "Give me my daily bread." He said, "Give us our daily bread." In other words, we're not meant to eat alone, and it's us for everybody, so everybody has their bread. And what I try to do is I try to approach it like a Jesuit, in the sense that you'd have these 16th century Jesuits, whether they're going to Africa or whether they're coming to Quebec. They have nothing except a copy of the Bible and the shirt on their back, and they're trying to introduce the Word of God to the people. They don't care if you're black, they don't care if you're Indian, they don't care about it. Like, and they were ready to sacrifice their lives. So when I write that section, I do that whole section, but I never once talk about like skin color. It's all about being human. It's all about being Christian. It's all about the Lord's Prayer and the way I integrate like I try to make that point in my book. Whereas today, this kind of, and my point on this is that I try to say to, and I've been on X as well, or when I can, I try to say to people, because where I went to school, like the way the demographics were, there were no black people at that time. Right, this
Mm,
is in the 90s, so there were a couple of black guys that came from Africa that I used to talk to. They were in the engineering program,
hmm.
but maybe like 10 people or 20 people in the whole school, right?
Yes.
But but like I try to say to people, do not get angry at black people today, because I see it, Dale, and I'll be honest with
Oh
you,
yeah.
especially on the right, and I'm seeing this anger, and I'm going, because what you guys are doing, you're going about it the wrong way. It's not the black guy that's causing me problems. It's the academia, it's the government that is talking about all this shit. I worked with some black guys for fucking 20 years. I used to go to the gym with, like, nobody used to talk about any of this shit. Excuse my language, by the way, Dale, because some of it gets me mad. But I say to people, I don't, I went to school. It's the white professor accusing me, the white guy, of being racist. But there's no black people involved in any of this. That's number one. Number two, they don't care about the black people. They don't care about the poor people. They just hate the rich. They hate success. They hate the rich. They hate, if there's someone like Candace Owens, well, she's black, but she's not black enough because she's too successful. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
their
There's
version.
always
They,
something.
Yeah, there's always something like, and so my point being is, I never get mad at any of the. I try to explain to people, don't get mad at the black people, because especially in Canada, it's not coming from black people. It's coming from the white trash, the crackpots that are pushing this down on other white people, right?
Yes.
You know. So that's that critical race theory, right? And I can even discuss, like, and I'm sitting down there, like, if I can add on this, the hypocrisy, because Marxism, one of the fundamental tenets of Marxism, The value of a product, surplus value, comes from the embodied labor that's inside the product. So how can you say at the same time all the wealth was taken from India or from Africa, at the same time be a Marxist and say the value of the product is embodied labor because it has to be the working class person living in Sudbury, Toronto, making like there's a huge like a mathematical hypocrisy to the whole thing. And even when they say that, I'm like, do you realize in India, like, just even think about it. When Karl Marx was writing his Das Kapital, he's working in the Soho district of London. And the working conditions in London for these working class people were just as bad as in Africa. Or like, he wrote on this. Karl Marx wrote on the working day. These people are working 12, 16, 18 hours a day, like 7 days a week. Like, they were just treated like animals. And he writes this in his book. So when they're talking about colonialization and exploitation, in India, there might have been 20,000 people in Britain that actually benefited from colonialism, the exploitation of Africa. There was such a small percentage of people,
Yes,
like
the
like
average person
it's minute.
didn't benefit from
Yeah.
it. They didn't see that money, right? But then the rich people make you think that it's the average person. And
Yes.
like I sit down and I tell people, I said, listen, the only reason why people did things was because they had opportunity and they had wickedness in their heart. It's not a race thing. It's about if you have opportunity and if you're wicked, you're going to do wickedness. Because there is
Yes.
no race on this planet that does not have wicked people. They all do, right? And so it
Yes. Yes.
depends. Are you going to follow God or are you going to follow the devil? That is just really it. And so people need to start understanding and looking at this way because the racism, one of the things I cannot stand about it, I don't care where it comes from, whether a black person, white person, whatever, it blinds you severely. This is like what the
Yes.
Bible says God hates respecting of persons, racism, classism, whatever you want, anything that judges a person other than their character and their actions is respecting of persons. And it blinds you to the weakest things, even this tribalism that people are having that just shuts
Yes.
their brain off because they're saying somebody's on the different side, but they're saying the exact same thing as you, but then they write them off. You get the worst amount of evil because you'll turn your eye to something because that person is because of a part of a group you don't like. And that's where so much this is where the guys that are rich that are doing all of this stuff and bending everyone over, they're laughing because they're getting us to do the fighting for them while they sit
Yeah.
back and they reap the benefits of it. This is what's
Yeah.
happening.
I find that it's the in that academic world, and it has like the reason why it has such an influence is that and I go after academia is because right now in Canada, 44% of the economy is government, and a lot of these government positions, yeah, people don't realize this. Like, just think, it used to be like 20% back in 1960, then it went up to 28%. Like, now it's just a massive percentage. I think right now it's like 1 out of 4 employees is on the government payroll, either at the provincial, quote unquote, state, federal level, like in some way, shape, or form. And that
That's
a
insane.
lot of
And they
these quacks, yeah, these quacks go into the government, and it has like an excessive impact on society as a whole. And so, but most of that stuff, the most of the stuff like the racism, if you will, like I say to people, like, it doesn't come, like, it's not coming from the black guys that I've worked with for years or gone to the gym with or wherever, right? Like, it's coming from the government. It's coming, and what's even worse is it's white. Like, I'll give you an example. Not only does it come from the white professors. When I went to school, Laurentian University, it ended up going bankrupt, right? So it went bankrupt. It was just a catastrophe, right? Like, some of the things that these people were doing were illegal. Like, if in the private sector, if you were doing what they were doing at the university, you'd be in a jail cell. But what
yes.
do they do is the day the university goes bankrupt, what do? They post on the website, "Oh, Black Lives Matter," right? Like, we may have gone bankrupt, but Black Lives Matter. I'm like, well, Black Lives can't matter a whole lot because you just bankrupt the school. Black Lives Matter can't matter a whole lot because now the black guy born today at 25 years old, how he can't afford to buy a house in Toronto with inflation. Black Lives can't matter a whole lot because your property tax that used to be $3,500 back or whatever in 2004 is now like $10,000, right? Your Black Lives Matter can't matter a whole lot when your thing is Starbucks coffee is not used to be 9.99, now it's 15.99, right? So when they're talking quota Black Lives Matter, you want to do stuff for Black Lives Matter, get your inflation under control, right? Make invest. Like, you know what? Even have a normal discussion with the United States. Would it be worthwhile for Canada and the United States to use the American dollar? Would there be any benefit for the Black life? No, no one's going to have that discussion. Would it be better if we integrated our banking system so there's a freer flow of investments so the American companies could just come in and invest in mining, in oil,
Y-
in AI or whatever? Like, that's when Black Lives Matter. Having the professor stand up in front of the classroom and go, "The white man is the racist. Look what he did to all the like." This is just nonsense.
You know,
So Dale.
actually, if they actually still respected the Jay Treaty, we wouldn't be having to have this conversation because
The
Americans,
the what?
the Jay Treaty that was signed in 1794 and ratified in 1796, and Canada decided that they
Okay.
weren't going to honor it. It allowed natives to freely pass and not pay duty or anything else like that, and it was initially there to allow Canadians and Americans to cross either side of the border to conduct business without restriction. Oh, look at that. But that would have been far more beneficial. They, obviously left certain portions off and just kind of threw it to the side. The Thomas Jefferson actually, when they attacked Canada, Canada during the War of 1812 and that sort of stuff, but they never formally dis like got rid of it because they didn't conquer the British and they didn't not ratify it by Senate, and then Canada just said, "Well, we're not going to deal with it," which is nonsense. Which would have made our lives way easier if we had that ability to just continue to have that of being able to cross to work and so forth without all of these restrictions and red tape, because it used to be one colony and they had businesses, people would have businesses on both sides of the border and conduct trade and so forth. And so it would have destroyed and crippled the lives of the people by creating those boundaries, which now it's created more problems. And I mean, it would have given people a lot more options if it was freer access to the United States, because they wouldn't be able to do that tyrannical nonsense because you could just go across the border and continue to work without any hindrances and going through the red tape. So that's just something that's there.
Yeah. That's to be Dale. Like, that's a different discussion. But I do know today that it is kind of revolting to see that our politician, because Donald Trump, he made a business offer. He goes, look, become the 51st state, or let's sit down at the negotiating table. And when I look at it and I listen to everything that's going on, you kind of have to read between the
Mm.
lines because they're keeping a lot of these discussions secret. What I think it is they wanted access to, Donald Trump wanted access to our banking and our telecom. And on the Canadian side, they're like, no way, you're never going to get our banking, you're never going to get our telecom. And the reason why is that our banks here in Canada, these five banks, the major banks, they have monopoly, more or less a monopoly on Canada. Like the TD Bank, for example, it's gone into the United States, TD Bank North, a massive bank in the Northeast United States. Whereas in Canada, if they give up the banks, they give up the telecom. There's no more Canada. There's literally no more. There's no reason for Canada to exist independently. But what I find revolting is the fact that there is a legitimate business discussion to be had around Canada and the United States joining, where you can ask simple questions in terms of if we shared the United States dollar, would that give us a better economy of scale in terms of purchasing and decrease inflation, or at least lower it or slow it? If we had a better free flow of capital between the United States and Canada, where their banks can come in and we can, have easier access to our financial markets that way, is there a benefit to Canadians? Like, there is a legitimate discussion that could be had around this, and it's total, utter silence. It's revolting in the sense that neither Pierre Poilievre, the conservatives, the liberals, no journalist, no one notices this, but it's utter, total silence. And not only is it silence, it's insulting Donald Trump. Oh, he's a fascist, he's a dictator, he's this or that. But I'm like, why is like Donald Trump is actually the nice guy in all this, because what he's saying is he like if you listen, I have a bit of a background in it as a credit analyst, by the way. if you take a look at what Donald Trump is saying, he's going, look, in the United States, we're having financial difficulties, as all these countries are, right? He has debt. He has massive debt problems. He has to look after the United States. He has to bring some of these jobs back in the United States. Like everything he's doing is totally fair. But what he's doing to Canada is he's saying, look, I'll make you an offer, right? Like become the 51st state, and then like this will help us offset some of the challenges. And if the United States tanks, if the United States dollar tomorrow went down to zero, the economy crashes,
We're done.
Canada, we're hooked right in with them. We're all done, right? The whole planet would go. But China, some of these countries like China, Russia, they're weaning themselves off the United States. And again, I don't want to speak too much out of my wheelhouse, right? Because this is an area where I'm not as fully versed in. However, I'm smart enough to know that there's a serious business discussion there to be had. And on the Canadian side, Stephen Harper is a beast. When he sits down, and he went on record and never denied it, saying that he will impoverish Canada. And when he's talking about Canada, he's like, he will impoverish the Canadian family. He will make Canadians suffer. They will be poor. They will, like, he'll destroy your family. His family will be protected. His family will be looked. All these politicians, they'll all look after themselves. But the Canadian family will live in poverty before we're going to sit down and have a normal discussion, business discussion with Donald Trump about, integrating the economy. It's like it's all, I see it kind of tied together in the sense that here in Canada, like there's a status quo inside Canada where it's we have to keep the whole thing together. We have to protect the five banks. We have to protect the telecoms. There's a couple of families in there that we need to protect. We have to have Alberta send all this money to Quebec to prop up Quebec so that like there's this illusion that we're all, all equal, and protect the status quo. And Danielle Smith is in there. But this status quo, what is happening very rapidly is, and again, this is kind of like the revolution, is that the technology is moving, the world is changing, and those guys, they're stuck in this 1983 type mindset, which I don't see it working.
I I have to sit down and say that the people, they know what's coming because they have a lot of guys that do and analyze risk. And if you're analyzing risk, you're going to know that these things go sideways and they're choosing not to do it. Because, like, I mean, I do analyzing risk is a lot of what I do in my area of work and so forth. And so you can't tell me that they have all these guys doing all this risk analysis that don't know what's happening. I don't believe it. I don't buy it. It's actually impossible for it not to happen. When I look at some of this stuff, I have to look at there's deliberate natures. And Stephen Harper is, yeah, that guy is, I don't like him very much either. His track
No.
record is horrendous. And people, this is where tribalism just is a problem. Because when I look at it, I'm seeing this whole concerted effort going to destroy this country. And I have a very different perspective than a lot of people because when I whistle blew through COVID, I got destroyed. I mean, absolutely destroyed. I came out 2020, said the engineering controls were wrong, came from the CDC. You guys got a problem. I found myself strapped to a bed, drugged against my will, wiped out financially. Had them commit fraud, said forged documents submitted to a court after they fraudulently sold my house, and the judge just transferred my title using the wrong act, knowing full well that it was criminal activity. Like Canada that we're living in, like what happened to me and my family, that'll happen to anybody. They're going to
Yeah,
make
yeah.
us poor one way or the other, and they will use force to do it. And this is what people need to understand. We're not run by a government. It is a criminal organization because you don't do this. Like, I'm not sitting down and saying every person in the government's a criminal. There are people that fully well know what they're doing and they're lining their pockets to do it, right? And
Yeah,
they
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and they don't care about what happens to anybody. They don't. Like you said,
Yeah, yeah. That's where I see it. I see it that like I would say that i- ideally, I think like I'm not a big. I don't see it in the 1970s, for example, into the 80s, where it was like this evil quote unquote group. But what I do see now is that the world is changing and they are becoming evil, right? Like it is an evil in the sense that the world is a lot of things are changing very rapidly, especially on the technological, demographic, and financial levels. And the world, and I wrote this in one of my books, Trump or Termite, and I just said that you're seeing here in Canada where, like, what direction are we going in, right? So you can see there's China kind of breaking off and maybe Russia kind of siding a bit with China. Then there's Europe going a different way from the United States. And our government right now is going to try to take us to where? To Europe, right? You say we're the most European of the, non-European countries or
Carney's
whatever. Like,
he's just
he's an idiot.
yes.
We have nothing. We have nothing in common with Europe. Like, I've grown
No,
up on American television. What's that?
I said no. My sister was married to a guy from Denmark, and I thought no European. No, absolutely not.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah, exactly. We're by far and away closer to the United States. Like
Yes,
growing up in American culture, growing up like I worked for an American company for 20 years. Like these guys, like I wish Europe well, but I'm not British. I'm not French. I'm not Italian. Like I have, you know how we're okay in terms of race. I had black customers in the United States. We are so much closer. I worked with a British guy, and it's like I don't give a fuck about. Excuse my language. I don't care at all about soccer. I don't care like whatever their culture is over there. I wish them well, but I could sit down, and if we're gonna have a table of like. I could talk about football with the American guys. I could talk about UFC, MMA. I could talk about all the shows, Gilligan's Island,
we understand
whatever. You
that.
know what I mean? Like we all understand like it's all the same like growing up Airwolf whatever Kit Knight Rider Dukes of Hazzard
Yes,
like
everybody
you
knows
make
that.
the yeah like you make the joke about the girl wearing the Daisy Dukes. Okay, we all know like there's a cultural level of understanding where we're by far and away more American, and especially on the religious level. Like I listen to so many more of the American Christians, which doesn't exist in Europe, right? It just
No,
there's a little bit, but like so I'm sitting there and I'm saying, our guys in Canada, they're so desperate to protect their banking system, their telecoms, the politicians, because they fully well realize that if you integrate the banks, the telecom, like financially, there's no reason for the federal government here in Canada to exist. So you get like a guy like Pierre Poilievre. He wants to be prime minister above anything else, right? It's like got to be prime minister, gotta get like I don't like and and then here in Canada, everyone's like docile about it. I said, do you realize like Jordan Peterson annoyed me on this because he's in the United States having these debates with like 20-year-old kids, and I'm like thinking, do you realize what Mark Carney is doing? Mark Carney is making this decision like a mass and Pierre Poilievre and all the politicians in Ottawa, they all go along with it where we're all more European than we are American. Like this is just
what do you,
it's
what
lunacy.
when people say that, I said then go to Europe. Go ahead,
Yeah,
pack your
yeah.
bags and go. Because if you think that you have more in common with Europeans than people who were born and raised in this country, you're nuts. You are
Yeah,
absolutely out of your mind.
yeah, yeah. Like I try to like it's even for the Europeans, they all refer to Canadians as like we're like Americans without guns or whatever. You know what I mean? Like the cultural differences. Like
we
I was in for a while. I spent about a month in London, and I'm like I have not like they're fine, right? Like I don't like the whole class thing. Like even in France, like the French guys when they would talk about how people dressed in the class and all that, I'm like I don't have that. You know what I mean? Like I've known millionaires who dress like bums and bums
yes,
like guys who can. I knew guys who can barely afford their rent, but they would buy suits just so they could look good. You know what I mean? Like here in Canada, the United States, it's very tough to tell if someone's educated or if they're rich. You know, when you first meet people, you don't know. Like
no,
we don't have that. We don't have that class thing. Like you never know who here in Canada, United States, who you're talking to, right? Where in France and in Britain, when I would listen to them, like when I was there for a while, they were like their accent, where it depends your accent where you're located from, they judge you by your class. So the one woman was saying she was from a place, oh, it was up north, Newcastle. She called herself a Geordie, and she said, "Oh, they don't accept me because of my and I can't tell. You know what I mean? All the accents, like
yeah,
they all sound the same to me, right? But I'm like, okay, let me get this straight. Because you're from the north, you're from Newcastle, you're a Geordie, that they're not going to like you in the south because you're lower class. She's like, yes, yes, that's the way it works. I'm like, I don't have that. I've never here in Canada. We don't have that. You know,
Mm,
you could be whoever and people listen to you.
yeah, that's. I mean, as long as you do what you're doing, most people don't care, right? And
Yeah,
and I like I sit down when you see on social media does not represent the majority of Canadians because a lot of that stuff, like people say it online because they can sit in their basement and say whatever. Most people wouldn't do that out in public. It's just, and
yeah,
even still, it's like, do you really listen to what you're saying? Because half of the stuff that people are saying on social media, I'm like, I feel myself getting dumber just reading it, right? Because it's
yes,
not making any sense. And we need more clear-headed leadership, people who are going to make decisions and do things that are going to benefit people. Because I see a lot of people going at each other, and I don't even have time anymore. People are like, "Oh, do you go ahead and clear your name?" I'm like, I don't even care at this point in time because
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, now
it's more
there's
important
there's
to
so
get
much.
stuff done. Go ahead.
But it's here in Canada between our school system, the way I look at it, the twin pillars, the economic system and the education system. I'm like, you can like when I look at it here with Carney, and they're all going, all the politicians are going along with it. And a lot of Canadians, they're not even having that discuss. Like they're not paying attention. I'm like, if you listen, see, I worked in sales for a long time as well, so I got in the habit of, like that's my job is to listen to people. And I'm like, listen to Stephen Harper, listen to Pierre Poilievre, listen to what they don't say even. And I'm like, like these guys, they're not. There is absolutely, utterly no way that Canada can replace United States as an economic partner in any way, shape, or form. This idea that we're going to go out to Qatar or to Nambia or to Germany, like especially in Europe where they have their own economic problems, and you're going to replace 600 billion dollars of business, which is like 30% of the Canadian economy that goes back and forth with the American dollar. You're going to find a replacement for that, and you got to do it like how fast to offset, like, and they laugh at them, right? They
But
go, oh, some of this stuff is going to take a long time. Like that automotive industry, if once it moves and it's already moving, it ain't coming back. Like
yes,
there's no politician in the United States that will go, oh, we moved some of the plants down to Indiana. Oh, now we'll move them back to Canada. Once they're gone, they're gone. And these are massive industries. Like the automotive industry is only second behind the housing industry.
and that'll
And
collapse Ontario. Ontario is very much
yeah, like
dependent on it.
yes, like Oshawa, and then here in Quebec, where they're talking about these smelting plants, right? Like they go, okay, and they're going to move them to Oklahoma, and they're going to get $500 billion of investment from Qatar, which the deal's been signed. And I'm like thinking, if within what 5 years, 7 years, they got those smelting plants running, and that comes out of like it's like year over year, Canada, we're at the risk of being gutted, and there's no way you're going to make trade with South Korea or Japan or Italy to be able to replace that. Like it's just not going to happen. And I'm sitting here and I'm going, do you understand? Like they're already racking up this debt. They're going to remove some of these industries. Our economy is stagnant. We're already earning 30% less than Americans. Like, at what point? This was the the Quiet Revolution here in Quebec, and same with the French Revolution in the sense that they came down to economics, right? And I'm like how bad will it get? Like, and I eat a lot of the same food all the time, and I'm sitting there going, that tub of peanut butter that I used to buy for 3.99 in 2020, I've seen it now for $6 and as much as for 6.99, right? That's $3 more than compared to 2020. And I'm looking at the cost of Starbucks coffee. It used to be $8.99 in 2019, went up to $9.99. Today it was $15.99 for that Starbucks coffee. Yeah, the small bag. I'm not even talking about the big one. And I got three grocery stores, so I'd shop around. Sometimes I get it $13.99. Now when it goes on sale, it's only $12.99. Before it used to be like $8.99. And then I'm looking at, like, I just look at the some of these basic prices, and I'm going, if it continues like that year over year by 2030, what are you going to pay? You're going to pay $10 for a tub of peanut butter? You know, like I'm not talking expensive stuff here. For you won't be able to buy coffee anymore, or you're gonna have to reuse your beans like all day. Like I don't know how bad it's gonna get. I don't know like this pathway that we're on, but I do know that if this inflation continues, like I can't see, and at the same time, the United States, they have their own inflation problems, but their economy is still doing better. And if in the for example, the United, just in Texas alone, they are 30 million people, but their GDP is something like 2.8, 2.9 trillion. And they have 10 million less people than in Canada, but here in Canada, our GDP is like 2.2 or 2.3 trillion. Like
Yes.
so per person already in Texas. Like they like to compare and go, well, if you buy a house in Austin, Texas, let's compare it to Calgary. Is it that much? And I'm like, you guys aren't doing your math properly, right? Like go to Toronto right now. My brother's house that he bought in 2004 was 280,000. That same house is $700,000 plus your property taxes. Your income hasn't gone up by 3 times, right? Like
No.
so I don't know. And right now what I've noticed is that like nobody's having any discussion around the education system for 30 years, and everybody's kind of quasi avoiding the Canada United States economic discussion,
The, the,
right? So it so go ahead.
yeah, one of the reasons is the banks, like they got caught for laundering money, TD, in the
Hmm.
States. They're also okay. The Deutsche Bank years ago said that Canadian land was overvalued by up to 68%. The Bank of Canada came and said it was more about 30%. The fact of the matter is it's overvalued. And a lot of this is coming in because they're laundering money. Real estate is one of the easiest ways. When I was living in Vancouver, we knew it. You had big house mansions on Southwest Marine Drive and all these places empty. Might have a
Empty.
welfare person living inside of a mansion that was there because some criminal enterprise was buying real estate to launder the money, and they were allowing foreign investment. And Harper allowed this like crazy to come in and just buy whatever they want. So Canada's real estate problem is because they're laundering a lot of money. They talked about the Cullen Commission showed how the lawyers and the trust accounts how they were doing this and using real estate. They're doing this across the board. This is why they don't want anybody to come in there because they eventually everything's going to collapse and we're going to be
Yeah.
left
Yeah.
holding the bag. The Canadian economy, if this doesn't stop, it is going to be a worse collapse than the Great Depression. That's what we're
Yes.
heading
Yeah.
for.
Like yeah, that's like I I always don't want to be the doomsday guy. I don't want to be the guy that's like like it just seems right now, and again, it's difficult because even though like I've read, like I worked as a credit analyst for a short while. Like I could look at the financial statements of a publicly traded company, go on, the Nasdaq, pull these off, and you can more or less, unless they're fudging things, you can more or less have an idea as to what's going on. I find as soon as you move into the government side, the provincial, the universities, it starts to get vague. And then once you move on to the federal government, like I have a very difficult time like actually navigating it. I tried a few years and it's a full-time job, right? Like you got to be a chartered accountant. You really have to do like people are paid $250,000 a year, right? To look deep into into these numbers. But I don't know. Like I just know right now, and I've seen companies go bankrupt before, where right now the way that the government is behaving, I look at a lot of different signs. Like if things were going well, if things were fantastic and the economy is booming, they wouldn't be trying to push out all these free speech laws. Like you had Bill Blair who wanted to go after airsoft rifles, right? They want to push all these laws like Bill C-100, Bill C-36, Bill C-21, Bill C-8, Bill C-10. And I'm like, why didn't you need them 10 years ago or 20 years ago or whatever? Like, it's beyond the internet. The problem is that they're all starting to panic. That's the way I see it
Yes.
with the government. And when you're watching them panic, you're like they're trying to pretend that everything's under control. They're talking about their meetings. They're talking about what all these plans of pipelines, whatever they're going to be building. The reality is nothing's happening, and I
Yes.
don't see. I just don't. I don't see how we can excuse me, replace the United States as an economic partner.
We can't.
And I don't see, there is no way Melanie Jolie is going to South Korea to negotiate any investment deal. Like this is just not happening,
She
right? Like,
she no, she's not. She's not. And you have to understand the amount of infrastructure that we have tied together. And this is where people are not thinking these things through. And a lot of US places, if they start packing up and pulling their jobs back to the States, Canada's
yeah,
cooked. 100% cooked. Because we benefit more from them. And if we don't play ball with them, the economy will collapse and they will come in and buy everything on pennies on the dollar and we'll get bent
yeah,
over anyway.
yeah.
Right?
That's that. Like, and I don't see. I see Donald Trump. People like to accuse him of being the bad guy and all this, but I'm like, he is making us an. He's come out. He said Canada 51. Think about it, right? Like, I have to do what I have to do to look after the United States, but you're Canada. I'll make a deal with you, right? So like, even in terms of investment, I point this out where. Elon Musk, when he went to set up his data center, he had his Grok, his OpenAI or XAI data center up and running in 122 days. That's business. That's the direction the United States is going, right? They're opening up. You can see. I just watched Jensen Huang on Joe Rogan talking about Donald Trump with the power situation with this AI and how it's going to require power. He goes, they're going to be building nuclear power plants. They're opening up, like Donald Trump is fully in on what we have to do they have to do in terms of power, to spur on this next revolution in artificial intelligence. And I'm sitting here in Canada, like the Canadians, like, do you realize how far behind we're gonna, at the rate things are going, the difference between Canada and the United States, like it's going to be more. They're going to earn what, 50% more? They're already earning anywhere between 20 and 30% more than Canadians. And it's the greed, it's the evilness in Canada of these guys trying to protect, like, we have no university system. We have no journalists. Like, it's all been gutted. You have 23% of the population that's not even Canadian. They're Canadian, but they're not born here. They have no ties. Do you really think they care about, Samuel de Champlain discovering Quebec in 1608? Canadians, nobody cares about this stuff. All of our relatives, we all came from somewhere else to Canada. We can move on again. You know what I mean? Like, wherever
Yeah.
you came from, like, it's time to it's time, like, you want to be Canadian, like, do what they do in the South. Wave the Confederate flag. You want to be Canadian, wave the Canadian flag. But like, it's time for these people to start having like serious, hard discussions about integrating the United States, the economies, and when I see people like in Alberta, Daniel Smith, where it's like, okay, we're going to protect the status quo. And don't get me wrong, I don't think we're going to collapse like in a year or two, but I can see. I listen to guys like Michael Blurry and David Walker. I could see somewhere around the year 2035 where the people aren't going to be going, oh, are they Marxist or the transgenderism or any of this stuff, or Stephen Harper and like, because Stephen Harper knows if they integrate the economies, his business as being prime minister, it meant nothing. It's all personal, making money, your reputation, your own little personal fiefdom. Like, it's like sit down at the negotiating table and start hammering out
It
deals and give it a.
it won't last 2035. That's way too long. From just like looking at the control systems that they have in this country, they're weak. They're absolutely weak. Canada is on there's too many things going sideways in multiple areas that for Canada to last till 2035. That is a very optimistic
Yeah,
outlook. Like extremely, because there's the other thing that people don't realize is that Canada is a huge national security risk to the United States because of our porous protection of our country. And that, like the guy from CSIS came in there and said that every level of government, going all the way back to Mulroney, under the influence of the CCP. And then we have federal liberals that they were reported to be getting contributions from cartels, and they were talking about how much cartels were moving stuff to Canada because it's easier to get it across the Canadian border than the Mexican
yes,
border. So when
yes.
you're looking at some of these like almost $500 million fentanyl labs, super labs being put out in rural places in BC. Canada's a huge place. You can have a ton of those, right? With almost
Yeah.
nobody there. And this is another issue that needs to be reined in. The RCMP are not cooperating with the United States because there's a lot of corruption there. And guess who they controls the RCMP? The federal government.
Yeah, 2035 may be optimistic. Like I I know a lot of people that, like when I talk around, you might be the same way, is that it's crazy. Even my niece who's like in her 20s, like we were talking about it, and like everyone feels like in Canada, like there's something, even people that don't, that like maybe 5 years ago weren't politicized before COVID, that like everyone feels like there's something off here in Canada, like there's just something weighing on top of everybody. And I don't know, I just know that if Donald Trump continues the way he's doing, and if they continue to move that automotive sector down to the United States, and if year over year this continues to take place, and they move like the smelting plants from Quebec down to the United States, and they continue to do this, and and again, when they negotiate the next trade deal between Canada and the United States, which is going to be next year, like, is it year over year it's going to get tighter? And once all these companies move down there or whatever's put in place, it's not going to change. And I'm like, they have to seriously, like, someone has to, but I just don't see it here in Canada where all of our political leadership, all of our quote unquote academic leadership, all of our intellectual leadership, and I got a little bit frustrated because I think I'm the only person who ever even tried to write a book, right? Canada, the 51st state. I call it Trump or Termite, Canada, the 51st state. And in that book, I kind of take a shot at Canadians, like a lot of shots, right? And I think I'm the only one. And I've reached out to a few people, and they're like, no, no, we don't want to discuss books. And I think there's a certain amount of fear, even in Canada, where for Canadians to openly talk about, okay, what would the deal look like, right? What would
I,
the can the fifth, you know?
I think structurally speaking, it would be better because Canada can't govern itself at this point in time. When you look at what's going on, it's overrun, and being able to fix this, I don't see too many people in Canada with the political will to do so or the actual will to do so because more people are just, well, I'll just, try to submit and ride this one out. That's not the way it works. Tyranny never
Yeah,
goes away by itself. If you're not going to get up and resist it, this is why they went after Christianity because Christians, they're like, well, God doesn't say to do that, so no, I'm not going to do it. And they don't
yeah,
have to be violent. They just peacefully resist, but you'll never force them because they're like, well, I serve God and I answer to him before you, and he can do a lot worse to me than whatever you can do. And if you kill me, well, I get rest from this wickedness anyway. So I mean, I get to be with
yeah,
Jesus, and so who cares, right? Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I even look at it though, like one of the biggest differences between Canada and the United States right now is that in the United States they have a huge private sector with all their private, the venture capitalists, right? Some people say they're bad. But I'm like overall, this is one of the best parts of the United States. And I'm like, if you look in the United States, the difference between Canada and the United States, they have all this energy, all the Elon Musks, the Sam Altmans, the Jensen Huangs, all in the private sector where all this energy, all this intelligence that's outside of the government that's producing, because we're on the cusp here of these massive technological changes with artificial intelligence leading the way. And I'm like, what if like in Canada we don't have that. In Canada it's all if you watch the CBC or any of the news networks, it's not what are our business leaders doing. It's like the Marxist. Name me any of the business leaders that are like, where's the Canadian Elon Musk? Kevin O'Leary's in the United States. And I'm like, I for Canadians have to ask themselves, like, how do we integrate the economies and let that American, because that energy does exist in Canada. It's so crushed down. And I'm like, to liberate that energy, to have that America, have like an Elon Musk come into Alberta and say, okay, you got $30 billion you're not going to be sending to Ottawa anymore. let's work together to put some investment into robotics or something to drive your economy, to create jobs, to make a better, better lives for the people. And nobody, all this business. I was watching Carney. I forget what country he was in, but it was like Thailand or some place where the GDP of the country was like $15 billion. Like this country's like it's in a state of poverty. What deal are you going to negotiate with like Cambodia or wherever he was, right?
He,
Like it's not going to happen.
Carney is a front man for the robber barons that are going to pillage this country
Yeah,
and
yeah,
make
yeah.
us broke. That's all he's here for. He's not going to do anything useful. He's going to be like Daniel Smith, who say the right things to make you feel good, but will not deliver. Right? And
Yeah,
then, no.
there's no practical outcome.
And this is,
But you know what? You know what, Dale? I was thinking maybe we should look at wrapping things up. I don't
yes.
know if there was anything you want to conclude on.
Yeah, like this is what I was about to say because yeah, it's getting kind of late here. I got some stuff to do. To travel in the morning, but the we have to start thinking about where we're going as Canadians. We
Yes.
cannot stay here in the status quo. Canada needs to change the way think. Like they have too much cronyism and nepotism in this country. That needs to go away. They need to allow a freer market and people to
Yes.
actually have competition because I see some of the best and brightest getting destroyed and crushed, and they're just giving a, like you said, a pass and open the door for these insane people to go into these places, and they're driving this country into the ground. So they really want
Yes.
to have a free market. Let everybody have a fair shot to compete, and let the best men win. Right? Like that would be the
Yes.
best way to go.
It's night and day. Like if when you follow it for any length of time, like our news, like like Thomas Mulcair, like when they were talking about Algoma Steel laying off 1,000 people, and Thomas Mulcair comes up and he goes, "Oh, they have to raise this in the House of Commons." I'm like, this is all minutia. It's just nonsense. It's like sitting around having debates in the House of Commons, having Mark Carney go and do a photo op and talk about, the investment in Alberta. What like Elon Musk built one of the most advanced data centers known to man in 122 days. Right, 100, that's 4 months. He had this 100,000 GPU data center up and running, offering services to business, to people on act like where is that? Where is the in Alberta in 120? So he's been what, prime minister now for 6 months or whatever it's been, like nothing. Like not like there's no I don't see this crew doing anything of having any ability whatsoever to be able to on the economic. It's like a decay in Canada on both fronts. It's like the moral academic decline, and now you're coming into that financial decline. And if they're going to
Yes.
start printing money to pay off all these, like one predates the other, and we are very fortunate in that Donald Trump is an unusual cat in history, and that he's giving us that. He's like, look, here's a deal. Let's work something out, because if he didn't say it, like at least it's on the table, and like he's actually being nice, because he wouldn't have to, technically he wouldn't have to offer anything. He could just say America first, you know, Canada, good luck in whatever you're going to do, right? But he didn't do that.
Well, no. What's ended up going to happen, and I'll say this before we wrap up, you can tell people where to find you, is that he gave Canada the offer either Canada's going to take it willingly or they're going to take it begging on their knees, right? Like
Yes.
that there's no way around it that we're going to win this. People have been talking a lot of, they're blowing a lot of smoke up at people's hind parts,
Yes.
and then they're going to find out when they can't put food on their tables. A lot of people are at that point, and they're destroying people and they're crushing people that can help. And this is what's happening. So Canada's shooting itself in the foot, and at the end of the day, we're going to suffer. It's just the way it is.
Yes. Yes.
It's really it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I
thanks for
agree.
coming. It was a great discussion. I mean, we can do this again sometime. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we
Yeah.
can talk about. So yeah, tell people where
I'd
they.
love to talk more about the Christianity. Like I wrote
Yes.
my book, The Irreplaceable Christian, and You and I agree on that. There's a huge like that's a whole other discussion. I was gonna try, but I want to do it properly. Like if you pick up that, if you read the gospel according to Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, whoever, like Matthew, that's it's the one I like to go my go-to gospel.
Yes.
What was happening back 2,000 years ago during the times of Jesus? It's exactly the same thing today. Like it
Oh,
is
yes.
so relevant, mind-boggling so. Like, it's and I appreciate that because I've spoken to some people where, what's crazy today, Dale, is that even if I put Jesus aside, I said, let's put Jesus aside, let's put God aside. Just go on your computer right now and look at the image. I don't know if you're familiar with Michelangelo, the Pieta,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So Mary's holding Jesus, right? I said, just tell me what you think of that. You don't have to talk about God or like when you see that, what do you think? And the reaction, it's like holding up a cross to a vampire. Like the reaction you get from some of the Canadians today, Dale, that like this visceral reaction against Christianity, this visceral reaction against Jesus, and even if you try to be like friendly and just okay, never mind, like what do you think of this painting, right? Just not even like just take any Christian painting, like the painting of Mary, the painting of Caravaggio, Jesus calling Matthew the tax collector, the sinner, like just look at this painting. What do you think? And the reaction is like anger and like I'm like, dude, you're throwing away like 2,000 years of like art, history, philosophy, like everything, like just like, it's but that we can do that discussion
Yeah,
another time.
yes, because this would be a long discussion because I mean, at the end of the day, people say that the state is fully secular, but they're actually not, and they're actually pushing a religion onto the
Yes,
people, and that is the issue. This is what most people are not realizing. Like I did
yes,
study on this, and whether you bow down to the idol or you do the practice, worship is worship. And you're
yes,
looking in our society, they're reconstructing all of these things that God said don't do. And when they did do it and they was widespread, he was like, wipe them out, and that's what happened. And so there's gonna be a
yes,
reckoning. So yeah,
yes, 100%. Yeah, yeah.
we'll have to come back and have that conversation. So tell
Yes.
people where they can find you and how they can reach you.
Oh, okay, yeah. So if anyone on X, if you find me, or you can go to my website, Sean, SEANF Cluche.com, and that's where you could find me. You can find all my books and give them a go. I often think my best book, my most simplest one, if people want to start, depending on your mood. If you're into the economic side, Trump or Termite might be good. Or if you want to read one just about like it's a fictional book, but it's based on a lot of reality. It's the one called The Bicycle Tire, and that might be it's also a good read as well. So, or if you want to go back to our original discussion about what's happening inside the school systems, The Odyssey Awoke it's a memoir, and I think as well that might be. I like all my books, so the only one I would not recommend right now and it's unusual as an author to say don't read my books is the one, The Irreplaceable Christian. Like that one would require people, one, you have to have some familiarity with the Bible, the Gospels, and then number two, it's not the easiest of reads, right? It's not the all my other books are relatively straightforward, except that one. It's the way it's designed. Like I do a lot of different things inside that book.
All right. Well, yeah. So go support it. Go check out his books, and if you have a foundation in the Bible, go check out the Irreplaceable Christian and so forth. And people share, like, subscribe, and so forth. And thank you for coming. Before I go, I'll close here with a prayer, and then, yeah, we'll
Yes,
we'll close it out. All right. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the love, grace, and mercy that you have given us and the hope that you have given us this day. Father, I ask of you this day to bring the men and the women to come together to rebuild our families, our churches, our community, and our nation. Lord, to turn this wickedness away and help us that we would have some peace and prosperity for the children who need the protection the most, is my prayer. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you again next, or not next week, but probably, well, actually, yeah, next week, Saturday.